Alright lads, my name is the Meta Goblin and welcome to my Unholy Death Knight PvP guide updated for 6.2. There will be a number of sections to this guide which can be accessed using the navigation bar above. We will be covering gearing, talent, glyphs, damage and utility, though if you actually subscribe to my channel you'll see many more videos covering more precise topics like for instance macros, arena comps and raid backgrounds and all those kind of things. Let's jump into the guide. First of all we'll begin with the essentials in order to ensure your Death Knight is properly tuned up to maximise his pressure in the PvP environment. On the screen now you'll see precisely which piece of gear to purchase in each individual slot. The philosophy is to maximise your mastery since this increases our shadow damage, thus the damage of Necrotic Plague, which is the ability which does the majority of our damage. We will also need the Force Set piece bonus since this increases our shadow damage further by another 20%, which is as powerful as most major cooldowns. You also want to make sure that all your enchants are for mastery and remember to use the Rune of the Fallen Crusader on your weapon. Remember that also that I will have all this written in the description, so you know, don't worry. The information, you're never going to lose the information. Before we go into talents, you must understand something about Death Knight's pressure since the talents directly affect it. Basically, DK pressure is reliant on affecting every target in the arena with Necrotic Plague and retaining that dot at 15 stacks. A dot can last up to 30 seconds but cannot be refreshed. The stacks build up naturally but also like every 2 seconds, but also with abilities that infect your target like Plague Strike and Icy Touch, and the dot can also be extended with Festering Strike. Now let's jump into talents properly. The thing you must understand about talents is that some are based on your own preference, some change their viability depending on your situation, and some are just completely mandatory. Like for instance the first tier. Here the choice is between Unholy Blight and Plague Bearer, but Plague Leech is completely unviable. Unholy Blight is nice to build up your dots quickly, your dot stacks, but it's extremely difficult to retain Necrotic Plague for 1.5 minutes until Unholy Blight comes back off cooldown. But it is possible, however. You may opt for Plague Bearer instead since it provides a method to build up stacks moderately fast, and it's not incredibly punishing if you lose Necrotic Plague off your target. Always remember that you can build up stacks with Plague Strike and Icy Touch, so it's not the end of the world if it falls off. In the second tier there is no choice, you always go for Lichborn. It's extremely helpful since Unholy DKs do so much rot damage which results in a lot of healing when Lichborn is active, and also in Unholy Spec you can cast Death Coils on yourself for even more healing. The third tier completely relies on your comp. If you are playing with other classes who don't have a lot of stuns, then you opt for Asphyxiate. If the comp has a lot of stuns and you and your DPS partner are melee, then you go for Chillblains, but if your DPS partner is a range, then you go for Death's Advance. So for instance, if you're playing TSG with a Warrior or Smokebomb Cleave with a Rogue, you go for Chillblains, but if you're playing Shadow Cleave with a Warlock, then you go for Asphyxiate. People have been like debating which is the strongest talent in the 4th tier since the dawn of time, and at the end of the day there is barely a difference between them all, but I'll explain the slight advantages of each. Blood Tap, you have more control of when you regenerate your runes. I find it helpful since I don't want my runes to kind of regenerate when I'm not in melee range. Runic Empowerment has a burst advantage since the runes regenerate instantly, but Unholy isn't actually a burst class, so I wouldn't recommend it to be honest. Runic Corruption, when used precisely, it will replenish your runes faster, but it requires you to pay very close attention to your runes, which you can't really do that in PvP, but it can however be controlled. So it's between Blood Tap and Runic Corruption, and I'll teach you how to use both in the damage section. The thing that's kind of cool about Blood Tap is that you can also turn your Unholy runes into Death runes, and you can also get a bit more healing from it from Death Siphon, but we'll talk about all that stuff later. In the 5th tier, I actually just explained it, I feel Death Siphon is the best option for Unholy since we can regenerate more Death runes than Frost Spec, and I also think it just has great synergy with Blood Tap like I just explained. In the 6th tier you'll be using Golfien's Grasp in rated battlegrounds to mass grip people into AoE crowd control like Solar Beam. You may also opt for it in Arena since it's a nice method to spread your dots, we'll talk about more a bit later. Remorseless Winter isn't really an Arena Spec talent since it's so easily avoided. Desecrated Ground is like having an extra trinket, it's extremely useful. Right now I'm like a Worgen, and because of this talent I don't even bother equipping the PvP trinket. In the last tier it's Necrotic Plague, okay, and we're going to talk about this in the damage section, so don't worry about it right now. The other two talents Defile is not really PvP talent, because guess what, players move, if I would explain this. BOS, again, you know, players move out of it so easily, so... And Necrotic Plague is what Unholy DK is all about anyway, so let's just focus on that. Now let's jump into damage. Unholy Death Knights, they use a damage system called the Necrotic Blight system, which is the most important rotation to learn if you want to deal pressure as an Unholy DK. The ideology is to build up Necrotic Plague stacks and retain them there for as long as possible to slowly rot your enemies down. I like to imagine, you know, I'm like slowly choking someone to death, you know what I mean? In a MOP, DK was a mixture of rot damage and burst damage, but you know, now it's purely a rot class. It's a bit like Affliction Warlock and Shadow Priest, you know, that kind of class. So now let's begin teaching you the actual method. If you have opted for the Unholy Blight talent, then it's important for your target to be in close range while the ability is active so that the stacks of Necrotic Plague can build up. So always in your opener, use Chains of Ice or possibly even the Pet Stun to get your target close and keep him close. Your dot will begin at a 23-second duration, and Festering Strike extends the duration by 6 seconds, so in the opener only use one Festering Strike, because otherwise you're just going to waste it. The Festering Strike will also extend the duration of Chains of Ice, that is important to learn. The idea from then on is to, like, you keep spamming Festering Strike to keep Chains of Ice on your target and Necrotic Plague at 30 seconds, or at least above 20. Enough for Unholy Blight, you know, long enough for Unholy Blight to come off cooldown so that you can let the dot drop off and then easily build up the stacks once again. The next most important thing is to keep everyone in your enemy arena team or RBG team infected with the actual dot. You can spread the dot with Blood Boil, however you can opt for Golfing's Grasp to spread your dots in arena by simply using Mass Grip the precise moment you know you can grip everyone to yourself on your target and precisely before a dot ticks. Since when it takes it and deals its actual damage, the dot automatically spreads. And the thing that's great about this is because you know, Necrotic Plague can be dispelled, but if it's automatically spreading around, then you know it's going to be dispelled and it's automatically going to get spread, which is really cool being against a hunter, because you know it just keeps jumping from the hunter to the pet. It's really kind of, or no, the warlock. It's really kind of useful. The main reason why I'd recommend Golfing's Grasp over Blood Boil is simply because you need your runes for Festering Strike, and I always when I use them for Blood Boil, the dots kind of end up falling off. It's very difficult. Obviously Golfing's Grasp has a minute cooldown, so you will have to Blood Boil, but make sure you use it most optimally and don't spam it and consume all your runes. I'm not saying using Blood Boil is completely unviable and you should always go for Golfing's Grasp, it's just a suggestion. You know, you make your own mind up about this. I'm just going to sum that up. You know, you get your dots to about 15 stacks, so it's doing like all its damage, and you keep the dot up there, you keep it on everyone, and you're basically plaguing everyone, you're infecting everyone down. You're going to keep everyone in arena infected with Necrotic Plague, and you can slowly rot them down while your arena partner does their damage. And that's the ideology. You keep a lot amount of damage over a long period of time, and it just slowly rots down and ooms a healer. And you're probably going to get very close to kills and in like dampening stages. It's a dampening comp. Unholy DK is a dampening class basically, but you still can get the kill without dampening. I'm just saying that when dampening starts to occur, Unholy is just like fucking king of every class. And the idea is to like keep everyone in really low in the arena or whatever target you're training, so that your other DPS, whether it's a rogue or a hunter, he kind of like comes in with his like burst and bursts them down and finishes them off and executes them off and gets the kill. That's kind of so you're basically setting up kills for your arena partner. That's how Unholy DK works. Remember to consume your Unholy runes with Soul Reaper when your target is below 45% health, and Scare Strike when they are not, since you want to build up the runic power, and that Soul Reaper does a hell of a lot of damage. And your targets, because of Necrotic Plague, are going to be quite low over time, so that's when Soul Reaper becomes like really useful. Another important feature to Death Knight's pressure is to understand how to maximise the pet's damage. Basically, with each death coil, your pet gains a shadow infusion stack which will increase the pet's damage done. When it stacks a 5, the pet will transform and do even more damage. There is a method to keep your pet in dark transformation most of the time, and it's very simple to learn. Whenever your dark transformation is about to fall off, I'd recommend the add-on Tell Me When, by the way, to track its duration. When it's about to fall off, ensure you either have a big pool of runic power or some runes to consume. This is so that when the buff drops off, you can easily build up the stacks again so that your pet goes into dark transformation faster. If you get a sudden doom proc during this, then it's pretty much happens instantly, so remember to stop using your death coils and runes with when dark transformation is at about 7 seconds left, but obviously don't let necrotic plague fall off. And also, if you have a sudden doom proc when it's about to fall off, just hold on to the sudden doom proc, so when dark DT falls off, you consume the sudden doom proc and you get a bit of extra, you get an extra stack basically. Gargoyle is best used directly after dark transformation is activated, since it will kind of benefit from the shadow damage, because when you pop, I think we already discussed it, but when you pop dark transformation, your shadow damage is increased by 20%, which is why it's very important to make sure you're using dark transformation a lot and ensuring that you can use it a lot. However, it's also good to use Gargoyle during like strong strength procs, which have a very high chance to occur at the beginning of a fight, so always remember that as well. Use Empower Rune Weapon in emergency situations, like for instance when your necrotic plague dot is dangerously close to falling off. There's also a method worth mentioning, though it requires its own guide really, but there is a way to turn your Unholy runes into death runes so that you can permanently have an extra festering strike, so you can like spam free. You can only do this with blood tap. The idea is to wait until one of your Unholy runes is fully depleted and in the state of not recharging before using blood tap, so it forces that rune to become a death rune. It's difficult because you have to ensure all your other runes aren't fully depleted, but it's possible with the correct control. It's easy to turn one of your Unholy runes into a death rune. It's just a second rune that proves difficult, though this one extra death rune is useful, since you'll have to, you'll have an extra rune to use Blood Boil. Just make sure you don't consume it with an Unholy rune, because then it turns back into an Unholy rune. But if you consume the Unholy rune, which has been turned into a death rune with Blood Boil, with Icy Touch, then it will remain a death rune. It gets turned into a death rune again, without you having to use Blood Tap. Now let's run through the PvP utility at a Death Knight's disposal. The most important yet difficult ability to master in a game is Dark Simulacrum. You should always be using the glyph against a Druid, Mage or Warlock, since these are classes that cast their crowd control, which you want to be stealing and using against them. Anti-Magic Shell is your most mage cooldown against spellcasters, so you want to be using it as late as possible, like below 25% health. Never waste it to use, to block crowd control if you are taking a lot of damage in a fight, but if you're not getting trained, then use it to defend yourself against CC and build up runic power. Icebound Fortitude should be treated the same as Anti-Magic Shell, your first priority being using it to keep yourself alive. Only pop it to pop yourself out of stuns if you're not being trained, or if that stun will actually kill you, or you're getting a lot of pressure and you cannot do anything because you're in a stun, in a smoke bomb or something like that. Asphyxiate or Strangulate, if you don't opt for the talent, should be used whenever it becomes available and should be chained up with your arena partner's crowd control. The idea of crowd control is to get a chain of crowd control going and keeping the healer in crowd control for as long as humanly possible while you deal as much damage as possible with your cooldowns. Remember, PvP is all about timing at the end of the day, Chains of Ice is your main gap closer next to Death Grip. Don't be afraid to use it in dual wield, since most of your damage comes from Frost Strike, and remember you can also use Death Grip to interrupt casts that can't be spell locked by Mind Freeze. Paladin casts something on themselves and Priest do, but basically prevents you from spell locking them, so save in those situations you want to be using Death Grip to, make sure the cast doesn't get off. For Mind Freeze, just remember to use it as late in the cast as possible, because you don't want to get juked or fake casted, as they call it, which means you completely miss your Mind Freeze and the healer or DPS is free to cast all they want. Remember, when you are dropping low in health and your healer is struggling due to being in crowd control over time, you should begin using your spamming your Death Strike, since this will provide near enough immortality with the correct rune control. I just want to finish off talking about crowd control breakers like the Trinket and Desecrated Ground. Make sure you don't waste abilities like this. You only want to be using them when you are extremely close to a kill or you desperately need to defend your arena partner, otherwise it's just a waste, so remember to be patient. I mean, if your target is at high health, like full health, there's no point actually using a CC breaker to stay on your target, It's best to save it for when you really, really need it. Alright lads, that's it for the guide. Stay tuned for, in the future, upon releasing this guide, I'm going to start releasing guides for different classes, any class in the game, primarily focusing on PvE, You know, because I'm obviously going to be reading forums and talking to people about how to play classes, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to research things for the PvP side of the game, but it's going to be a little easier for PvE. But anyway, that's what's going to come up soon of a channel. Also have a lot of other videos planned soon. I'm sorry about the slow uploads, but you know, I'm working full time. You know, I'm on about 35 hours a week, so it's very difficult to get the videos out, but I am trying my best. Anyway, my name is the Meta Goblin, and until my next video, ciao.